Astonishment, lingering sorrow, and profound reflection are the emotions that wash over me. After researching and learning about more than 100 Black public figures connected to the romantic and sexual hidden corners buried beneath the perfect shell of fame. Hello everyone, we are our Memory Vault, and this is the video 21 Black celebrities who kept their sexuality a secret until death. This greatly impacts how we view the silent sacrifices of legends, and it might just leave you stunned. This video is perfect to play while you are resting, enjoying a meal with your family, or doing chores around the house. All the information in this video has been carefully researched and gathered from multiple sources. If there are any oversights, please leave a comment below to help our channel continue to grow. Please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and ring the notification bell to receive updates on our latest videos. Now let us step right into the stories of our first figures. Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston. Possessing a voice hailed as the voice was once an absolute symbol of perfection in the eyes of the global public. With hundreds of millions of albums sold and immortal love songs like I Will Always Love You, she appeared as an elegant goddess, a good girl of pop music. However, behind that brilliant exterior was a fierce internal struggle to maintain a standard image required by the entertainment industry and the expectations of her family. At her peak, Whitney was like a nightingale locked in the golden cage of fame, where every true vibration of her heart had to make way for dry commercial calculations. The biggest secret and also the most persistent pain of her life was her deep relationship with her soulmate, Robin Crawford. Later documents and memoirs exposed a tearful truth. Whitney had to bury her true feelings due to pressure from her strict mother and the fear of the public turning its back. In the context of the 80s, for a star at the peak of fame to admit a homosexual orientation was akin to career suicide. This prolonged emotional suppression, combined with the turbulence in her subsequent marriage, gradually eroded the legendary singer's spirit, pushing her to slide down into a swamp of inescapable dead ends. Through the contemplative lens of audiences who have experienced many ups and downs, the tragedy of Whitney Houston is an expensive lesson about the price of not being authentic to oneself. We see in her an incredibly massive yet deeply bitter sacrifice, having to spend her whole life singing about transcendent love, while her own heart had to endure being frozen because of prejudice. Her sudden departure in 2012 is a painful low note, reminding us that halo and money can never compensate for the freedom of the soul. Whitney is forever a legend, but her life is also a silent teaching about being more tolerant of differences so that no genius has to slowly die in the humiliation of concealment. Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday, also known as Lady Day, is the great soul of jazz music who turned worldly pains into haunting and mesmerizing melodies. Her singing was not just music, but the choked sobs of a life full of wounds from racial discrimination and labor exploitation. On stage with a pure white gardenia pinned in her hair, Billie appeared as a symbol of nobility amidst the storm. Yet few know that alongside turbulent romances with men, she also carried a sensitive heart for women, typically her silent romance with actress Tallulah Bankhead. In an era where being born black was already a harsh sentence, carrying the additional label of same-sex love was like a knife to the throat. Billie was forced to live in extreme caution against public scrutiny and the cruel pursuit of the authorities at the time. Her same-sex relationships had to take place in the shadows behind the closed doors of cheap hotels. The loneliness and pain of being shunned by society pushed her to seek temporary soothing in liquor and smoke, creating a vicious cycle of self-destruction from which no one could extend a saving hand. Looking back at the passing of Billie Holiday at the age of 44 in poverty and guarded by police right on her hospital bed, we cannot help but feel an indignation mixed with sorrow. She sang to liberate millions of people through the masterpiece Strange Fruit, but could not liberate herself from the noose of gender and racial prejudice. Her life is proof of the brutality of a system that only knows how to enjoy talent, but is ready to discard artists when they fall. Lady Day's legacy teaches us about compassion and the necessity to fight for a world where every human being has the right to be loved and to live true to their identity without fear. The truth about Whitney's angelic voice left us choked with emotion. But the secret about the stormy life of the Empress of Jazz, Billie Holiday, just now surely made you feel sorrowful. Please continue to watch, because the hidden corners of the king of rap, Eazy-E, right up next, will bring an ultimate astonishment. Eazy-E Eric Wright. Eazy-E, hailed as the godfather of gangsta rap, once shook the entire music world with his defiance and the massive influence of the group NWA. In the eyes of the public in the 90s, he was the symbol of street masculinity, a warrior who knew no fear before any authority. However, his sudden death from AIDS at the peak of fame in 1995 created a true earthquake, exposing hidden corners and never-ending speculations about his actual romantic life. This departure was not only the loss of a talent, but also a painful milestone regarding an epidemic silently devastating the Black community. Although the mainstream script always referred to him as a flirtatious player in the underground circles of the time, whispers about Eazy-E's secret relationships always existed like undercurrents. The extreme gender stigma in 90s hip-hop culture forced every artist to put on a super masculine shell to survive. Any admission of a different sexual orientation meant being completely erased from the music map. Eazy-E took his secrets with him into eternity, leaving a scene full of questions about where that vicious disease had actually been contracted during his hidden years. From our analytical perspective, Eazy-E's tragedy strips bare the cruelty of narrow societal definitions. He could bravely confront the police, confront the unjust political system, but had to surrender to the stigma regarding sexual orientation and illness right within his own community. His departure at the age of 30 is a stern wake-up call about the need to educate and change awareness regarding the LGBTQ+ community among Black artists. We should cherish what he contributed to music while simultaneously empathizing with the loneliness of a king who had to die in the silence of unspeakable secrets amidst an era where the truth was sometimes even scarier than death. Josephine Baker. Josephine Baker is a timeless legend, a Black goddess who used her wild dances and charm to completely conquer the glamorous capital of light Paris. She was the first Black woman to become a global superstar, a brave intelligence agent for the French resistance, and a tireless civil rights activist. Yet behind the roaring applause of the European elite was an incredibly complex and rebellious romantic life. Josephine never submitted to traditional gender norms. She openly loved and protected many women in her life, considering it a freedom that could not be stripped away. In an era where women were still bound by countless dogmas, Josephine Baker lived like a blazing fire, challenging all prejudices regarding gender and race. She did not hide the fact that she fell in love with talented women, considering it a transcendence of artistic emotion. However, that freedom also caused her to bear much disdain from conservative American officials every time she returned to her homeland. She had to live torn between a tolerant Europe and an America full of discrimination. Her life is an epic about liberation, but also soaked in lonely tears when the stage lights gradually dimmed. Looking back at Josephine Baker's journey, mature audiences will certainly admire the steel spirit of a woman who dared to be ahead of her time. She taught us that patriotism and courage have no gender limits. Her tragedy, if any, was having to witness the people she loved leave one by one in the silence of the era. Her passing in 1975 in a funeral following France's most solemn military rites was the final recognition for a free soul. Josephine teaches us that live as brilliantly and authentically as possible, because ultimately what remains in the human realm are not judgments, but the legacies of love and courage that we have left for the world. James Baldwin. James Baldwin is one of the greatest minds of the 20th century, a writer and philosopher who used his pen to surgically dissect the roots of the diseases of American society. Living in an era where Black people were considered second-class citizens and homosexuals were considered a sin, Baldwin bravely lived openly and proudly with his ego. He did not choose to hide. He chose to go into exile in France so he could freely write about the experiences of a gay Black man through classic works like Giovanni's Room. He is the bright torch illuminating the darkest corners of discrimination and hypocrisy. However, that pride also came with an incredibly expensive mental price. Baldwin always lived under the strict surveillance of the FBI, and the rejection from some civil rights movement leaders who held conservative views on gender. He was considered a deviant, a person bringing messages too bold for a community yearning for stability. Baldwin's greatest pain was not poverty, but the feeling of being alienated right in his own homeland. His written pages are heavy with reflections on identity, on how to be recognized as a complete human being with all the simplest desires to love. Through a contemplative lens, James Baldwin is a great lesson about the dignity and mettle of an intellectual. He taught us that truth always has more power than lies, and accepting oneself is the most powerful act of resistance against oppression. His funeral in 1987 was a sorrowful event marking the departure of a voice of conscience that never knew fatigue. Baldwin reminds us that love is never wrong, and our duty is to create a world where every soul can blossom under the sun. His life is a lighthouse for those lost amidst prejudices, teaching us to maintain faith in fairness and our own dignity. The Medal of James Baldwin is a great lesson on dignity, but the silent sacrifice of Hollywood's Black Rose Dorothy Dandridge, right up next, is truly a painful low note. Let us uncover the next tear-soaked pages of the legend's lives. Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Dandridge was a gorgeous beauty, a brilliant black rose who made history when she became the first black woman to receive an Oscar nomination for Best Actress. She possessed a haughty beauty and an innate acting talent, but her life was a series of continuous tragedies in a Hollywood full of racial and gender discrimination. Behind the stage halo, Dorothy had to live in extreme emotional suppression. Secrets about her discreet same-sex relationships, which were woven into the rumors of the upper class of that time, only deepened the loneliness of a star imprisoned in traditional beauty standards. Dorothy's greatest tragedy was being treated like a playing card in the hands of film moguls, those who only wanted to exploit her beauty for profit without ever giving her the chance to live true to herself. The ultimate loneliness, combined with failures in marriage and the financial burden of caring for her disabled daughter, pushed Dorothy into a spiraling vortex of depression with no way out. She turned to sedatives as a way to escape harsh reality. The whispers about her true sexual orientation, if exposed at that time, would have been the end of all the efforts she painstakingly built to break the color barrier in the cinematic capital. The sudden passing of Dorothy Dandridge at the age of 42 in a lonely apartment is a wake-up call about the cruelty of fame. To mature audiences, her story brings an ache regarding the fate of women in the old society. She sang, she acted with all her heart, but could not find a peaceful haven for herself. Dorothy teaches us a poignant lesson about the trade-off between career and ego. We should cherish her as a brave trailblazer while empathizing with the pains she had to take to the grave. The absence of tolerance in society at that time killed a brilliant flower, teaching us that the truth of a person needs to be respected more than any role on the silver screen. Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes, the renowned poet of the Harlem Renaissance movement, was the one who brought the breath of the streets and jazz rhythms into immortal verses. He was honored as the voice of ordinary black people, a warrior who used his pen to fight for national pride. However, Langston's private life was a painting full of quiet pauses. Throughout his life, he chose to remain single and was extremely discreet about romance, creating a solid glass closet that no one could violate. Later, researchers have pointed out that behind that silence was a heart with a homosexual orientation, having to hide to protect his status as an ideological leader in the community. In the context of American society from the 1920s to the 1960s, gender stigma within the black community itself was incredibly fierce. Langston Hughes understood that if he publicized his sexual orientation, the entire message about national unity and civil rights he was pursuing would be exploited by enemies to smear him. He chose to sacrifice personal happiness, burying his desires for love into metaphorical verses. His loneliness was not a choice, but a heavy responsibility he placed on his shoulders to keep the fighting flame of an entire nation from being extinguished by narrow prejudices. Reflecting on the life of Langston Hughes, we see a deeply painful nobility. He used his entire life to praise the freedom of others, but he himself could not freely hold his lover's hand under the sun. His departure in 1967 due to prostate cancer was a great loss, but the legacy he left behind is a lesson in steadfastness. He taught us that sometimes silence is also a brave act to protect greater values. However, in today's era, his story reminds us to try even harder to build a society where no artist has to hide love poems in the secret drawer of their life. Marsha P. Johnson. Marsha P. Johnson was not just a transgender woman. She was a legendary warrior, one of the leading flags of the historic Stonewall riots, opening the movement demanding rights for the global LGBTQ+ community. Living at the very bottom of society, poor, homeless, and shunned, Marsha always appeared with a radiant smile and fresh flowers in her hair. She was called the Saint of Christopher Street because of her boundless tolerance, ready to care for young people rejected by their families, while she herself didn't even have a full meal. Her life is the most brilliant proof that kindness does not depend on status or gender. However, behind that strong optimism were long nights facing the brutality of the police and the apathy of the world. Marsha had to pay a far too expensive price for the courage to live true to herself. She was considered crazy, a marginalized person, simply because she dared to wear colorful dresses and demanded to be called by her name. The loneliness of a pioneer is a pain difficult to express in words. She saved so many people, created a refuge for thousands of lost souls. But in the end, when she met with misfortune, society chose to turn its back and forget her heartlessly. The highly mysterious death of Marsha P. Johnson in 1992, when her body was found in the Hudson River, is a wound that has never healed in the heart of the community. To older audiences, her story brings an awakening about justice and human dignity. The fact that the police hastily concluded it was a suicide without digging deeper exposed the ultimate contempt for the life of a Black transgender person. Marsha teaches us a lesson about unconditional altruism and the fighting spirit for the truth. She is forever a brilliant symbol teaching us that no one is left behind, and fairness is only achieved when we know how to value the lives of the smallest people in society. Sylvester. Sylvester, the brilliant star and queen of disco, once made the whole world dance to the immortal melody, "You Make Me Feel Mighty Real." Unlike those who chose to hide, Sylvester lived a public, highly proud and brilliant life right in the center of the San Francisco community. With a soaring falsetto voice and glamorous makeup style, he was not only an artist, but also a symbol of gender liberation. He turned the stage into a sanctuary of freedom, where all barriers of masculinity or femininity were blurred under the sparkling colored lights, inspiring millions of people to dare stand up and demand the right to shine. Yet that brilliant life crashed into the cruel wall of the AIDS pandemic in the 80s. Witnessing his friends, teammates, and even his life partner, Rick Cranmer, pass away one by one in pain, Sylvester did not step back. He used his final days, even when his body was depleted, to become an active activist, calling for empathy and care for Black patients who were abandoned by society and the government. The pain of losing the person he loved most did not break him down, but turned into an extraordinary strength so he could raise his final voice for his community's right to live. Through a contemplative lens, Sylvester is the embodiment of a soul that never submits. He taught us that true glory does not lie in golden trophies, but lies in how we face death with calmness and vast compassion. His passing in 1988 was an incredibly great loss, but it was also a glorious musical note, ending an epic about freedom. Sylvester teaches us to appreciate every present moment, to love sincerely, and to always be ourselves, even if the whole world tries to stop us. His musical legacy vibrates forever, reminding us of a tragic era and the people who bravely lit up the darkness with faith in human compassion. Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde, who self-identified as a Black lesbian mother warrior poet, was one of the most powerful voices of the feminist and human rights movements. She did not accept silence. To her, your silence will not protect you. Lorde used her sharp pen to surgically dissect the intersecting injustices in society, fighting for Black women who were being marginalized by both the civil rights movement and the white feminist movement. Her life was a tireless journey seeking justice and empathy between human beings. However, the life of a female warrior is also full of pain and loss. Lorde had to fight cancer for 14 long years, considering the battle with illness also a part of political struggle. She lived torn between her intense love for women and the harsh stigma from the outside world. Her greatest pain was not the approaching death, but witnessing a society still with too much division and hatred. She wrote about illness, about fear, and about love, with a heartbreaking honesty, turning personal experiences into precious lessons for an entire generation. Looking back at Audre Lorde's journey, mature audiences will certainly find in her an incredibly massive source of internal strength. She taught us that acknowledging our own differences and those of others is precisely the beginning of genuine understanding. Her passing in 1992 left a vast void, but her poems and essays continue to be a guiding compass for struggles for human dignity. Audre Lorde teaches us to know how to use our voice to protect ourselves and those around us, while turning pain into material to build a more tolerant world. Her life is a testament that true life only begins when we dare to step out of the shadows of fear. Lorraine Hansberry. Lorraine Hansberry was a star that shone brightly and also faded too soon in the sky of American theater. At the age of 29, she went down in history as the first Black woman to have a script performed on Broadway with the classic work A Raisin in the Sun. The play is not only about the dreams of a Black family, but also a manifesto about human dignity amidst poverty and prejudice. Yet behind that brilliant success was a private life full of quiet pauses. Lorraine was a woman with a homosexual orientation and an undercover activist for the rights of the LGBTQ+ community, during a period when that truth could completely destroy her reputation. Living besieged by expectations from the Black community, those who viewed her as a symbol of progress, Lorraine had to suppress personal desires to fulfill the role of an ideological leader. She wrote anonymous letters to lesbian magazines at the time, showing deep empathy with the pain of those who had to live hidden. The loneliness of a woman carrying on her shoulders too many burdens of the era is a silent tragedy that no camera lens could capture. She burned her brightest for art and justice, only for that candle to go out when her age had just turned 34. The death of Lorraine Hansberry from pancreatic cancer in 1965 is one of the most painful losses of Black culture. To us, her life is a lesson about unconditional dedication. She taught us that grand dreams always require sacrifice, but the greatest sacrifice is having to bury oneself to protect the beliefs of others. Her departure, when her talent was at its ripest, reminds us to appreciate time and live as fully as possible. Lorraine Hansberry teaches us to continue pursuing dreams in the sun, while making efforts to build a society where no one has to write anonymous letters to seek empathy for their own love. Jermaine Stewart. Jermaine Stewart was a brilliant R&B star of the 80s who brought the world the joyful, vibrant melody of the hit We Don't Have to Take Our Clothes Off. With handsome looks and a captivating performance style, he was the symbol of optimism and youth. However, behind the radiant smile and trendy outfits was a tear-soaked secret about his homosexual orientation and a lonely battle with AIDS. Jermaine spent his entire life building a clean, exemplary image before the public, a perfect shell to hide the romantic hidden corners that society at the time considered a disgrace. Jermaine Stewart's greatest pain was the fear of being abandoned. He understood that if the public knew the truth about his sexual orientation, the entire career he had painstakingly built would collapse in the blink of an eye. The tearing struggle between wanting to live true and the pressure to maintain the image of a universally loved star pushed him into ultimate loneliness. Even when illness began to erode his body, he still tried to force a smile before the camera, hiding the pain and fatigue just to protect the fake halo around him. He died in the stillness of a lonely hospital room without a single relative by his side because of the fear of worldly stigma. The passing of Jermaine Stewart in 1997 at the age of 39 is a poignant low note in the music of the 80s. To older audiences, his story brings a teaching about the cruelty of fame. He brought joy to millions of people, but could not find a simple joy for himself. Jermaine taught us that living under a mask is the heaviest punishment a person must bear. His life reminds us to lessen narrow-minded judgment and learn to empathize with the pains behind the stage lights. Jermaine Stewart has departed forever, but his smile in music videos will always remind us of a soul that once yearned to be loved and to live in the freest way. Willie Ninja. Willie Ninja is dubbed the godfather of voguing. Someone who turned catwalk steps and body movements into a language of resistance and self-esteem. Through the documentary Paris is Burning, he brought the ballroom culture of Black and Latino LGBTQ+ people out of the shadows of underground Harlem nightclubs to the wider world. Willie was not just a dancer. He was an educator, a spiritual father to thousands of teenagers rejected by their families, teaching them how to hold their heads high and turn flaws into brilliant strength. He was the one who redefined the concepts of glamour and pride. However, behind the lights of the ballroom runway was a harsh reality of poverty and a lack of medical services for the vulnerable. Despite being admired by the whole world, Willie Ninja still had to live in precarity and without health insurance when health crises struck. The AIDS disease silently ravaged the body of that warrior, turning the once fluid dance steps into laborious, painful steps. His greatest pain was not death, but seeing his children in his community still struggling amid stigma and the death surrounding them every day. He dedicated himself until his final breath to keep the House of Ninja always a warm home of love. The passing of Willie Ninja in 2006 at the age of 45 was a huge loss to pop culture. To us, his life is a lesson about creative power and altruism. He taught us that you can start from the very bottom of society, but as long as you have faith and steadfastness, you can create a legacy that changes the whole world. Willie teaches us to know how to care for and protect each other, especially those being marginalized by society. His life reminds us that true greatness does not lie in glamorous outfits, but lies in how you have lifted how many people up to stand with you. Willie Ninja has departed forever, but his spirit is still living in every dance step of the young people who dare to assert their personal identity. Sylvia Rivera. Sylvia Rivera is a legendary transgender activist who spent her entire life fighting for the most forgotten people in the LGBTQ+ community. As a person of color of Latino descent living in the poverty of 60s New York, Sylvia participated in the front lines of the Stonewall riots, fighting not only the police, but also the prejudices within the movement itself. She was the one who spoke up the loudest when Black and brown transgender people were pushed out of marches by white gay men because they were considered too wild or making the movement look bad. Her life is a stern indictment of discrimination right in the places that were supposed to have the most tolerance. The pain of Sylvia Rivera is the pain of a hero abandoned by the very people she saved. She founded the STAR organization to shelter homeless youth, sharing every piece of bread, every piece of clothing for friends in the same situation. Yet in her final years, she had to live in loneliness and illness, witnessing the fruits of her struggle being commercialized, while people like her continued to be marginalized by society. Her anger did not stem from hatred, but from a profound love for abandoned souls. She lived and died in the posture of a warrior, never submitting to bow her head before any injustice. Closing her life in 2002, Sylvia Rivera leaves a great lesson about loyalty to ideals. To mature audiences, her story brings a teaching about never forgetting those who paved the way for us. She taught us that a struggle only has meaning when it includes everyone excluding no one just because of their skin color or gender identity. Sylvia's life reminds us to always stand on the side of the vulnerable and to bravely raise our voices even when the whole world intentionally ignores them. Sylvia Rivera remains forever a brilliant symbol teaching us that true salvation only comes when we know how to love and protect each other unconditionally amidst the storms of life. Octavia St. Laurent. Octavia St. Laurent is a precious gem of ballroom culture, a transgender woman who mesmerized the world with her sharp beauty and confident demeanor in the film Paris is Burning. She was not just a model, she was the embodiment of the dream to escape the harsh reality of Harlem to reach the glamorous world of high fashion. Octavia used the catwalk to assert the dignity of a Black transgender woman, turning life's sorrows into proud steps. To her, every outfit, every gaze was a statement claiming the right to be respected and the right to be beautiful in her own way. However, behind the glamorous dreams was a life full of traps and the sadness of a transgender woman in the old society. Octavia had to face cruel stigma in the fashion industry, where she was only considered an oddity rather than a true talent. Her greatest pain was the tearing struggle between the desire to be loved sincerely and the bitter reality of short, exploitative relationships. Cancer later struck like a cruel destiny, turning her final days into a series of lonely pains in a small apartment in Harlem, where she was only left with old photos for company. The passing of Octavia St. Laurent in 2009 was a sad, quiet note for those who love ballroom culture. To us, her life is a lesson about the power of dreams and the price of truth. She taught us that even if the whole world turns its back, you still have the right to dream and to shine in your own way. Octavia teaches us to empathize with lives that have to live on the margins of society and to know how to value spiritual values above material vanities. Her life reminds us that greatness is sometimes simply daring to hold your head high and walk amidst cruel judgments, leaving the world the most brilliant image of a soul that once burned its brightest for freedom and beauty. Kenny Greene. Kenny Greene was the lead vocalist of the R&B group Intro, someone possessing a smooth, warm voice that shaped the music of the 90s. Not just a singer, he was also a talented musician behind the hits of Mary J. Blige, contributing to the transcendence of many other artists. However, behind the resounding successes was a highly stormy inner life. Kenny was a bisexual man, living in an era where gender openness in the R&B and hip-hop community was still an incredibly luxurious thing. He had to live under a mask of traditional masculinity, hiding his truest desires to protect his career and the expectations of the audience. The tragedy of Kenny Greene reached its climax when he discovered he had AIDS. In his final days, when his body began to fail, he made a rare, brave decision at that time, publicizing his illness status and sexual orientation from his hospital bed. He did not want to die in lies. He wanted to use his own pain to alert the community about the danger of the disease and the necessity of tolerance. Kenny's greatest pain was the rejection by a part of his family and society after he told the truth. He took his last breath in stillness, taking with him the sadness of a talented person who spent his whole life connecting everyone through music but was separated in his final moments. The passing of Kenny Greene in 2001 at the age of 32 is a profound reminder of the fragility of human life and the importance of truth. To older audiences, his story is a lesson about the courage to face prejudice. He taught us that it is never too late to live true to oneself, even if those are the final moments of life. Kenny teaches us to lessen judgment and appreciate the contributions of an artist, regardless of who they are or who they love. His life reminds us to always stay alert and protect ourselves against temptations, while always being willing to extend a hand to those in difficulty, because human compassion is the only thing that can overcome all barriers of illness and stigma. Essex Hemphill. Essex Hemphill was a poet, an outstanding social activist who used his words as a sharp weapon to protect the dignity of gay black men. In the 80s and 90s, amidst the storm of the AIDS pandemic and racial discrimination, Hemphill's poetry was like a lighthouse of truth and pride. He did not only write about same-sex love, he wrote about survival, about the pain of being stripped of a voice, and about the power of community solidarity. His work is the roar of an unyielding soul, demanding the right to be present and to be respected in a society that always wanted to erase them. However, the life of that poet was also soaked with silent tears. Hemphill had to witness his friends, his closest comrades, fall one by one to illness and violence. He himself also had to fight the vicious disease amidst a lack of resources and social isolation. His pain was not only physical pain, but the ache of seeing his fighting efforts still unable to erase the fortress wall of stigma. He lived his final days in the stillness of reflection, using his last breath of strength to perfect verses instructing future generations about courage and human dignity. The passing of Essex Hemphill in 1995 at the age of 38 left a massive void in Black LGBTQ+ literature. To us, his life is a lesson about the responsibility of a writer. He taught us that literature is not just for amusement, but to bear witness to history and to save desperate souls. Hemphill teaches us to bravely face the truth, no matter how painful that truth may be, and to always protect the core values of human compassion. His life reminds us that the existence of every individual is a political act, and to live in a way worthy of the freedom we possess. Essex Hemphill is permanently a steel icon, teaching us to always maintain the flame of truth in our hearts. Melvin Dixon. Melvin Dixon was a highly intellectual scholar, writer, and poet who used his life to heal the fractures between national identity and gender identity. With masterful sensitivity, he wrote about the experiences of being a gay Black person in America and France, seeking a safe space for lost souls. Dixon was not only a creative artist, he was also a teacher, inspiring many generations of students about self-esteem and the power of culture. He believed that literature is how we record our breath before the world suffocates us. However, the life of that talented professor also had to face a cruel destiny. The AIDS disease attacked him when his career was at its ripest. Melvin Dixon's pain is the pain of an intellectual having to witness the gradual decline of mental and physical strength, while his soul still harbored so many unformed aspirations. He spent his final days writing about loyalty, about how to stay when everyone else has left. His loneliness amidst bookshelves and unfinished manuscript pages is a highly haunting image of the price of ultimate dedication to art and truth in an apathetic era. Looking back at Melvin Dixon's journey, older audiences will certainly feel the calmness and nobility of a great soul. He taught us that knowledge and love are the only two things that can help people overcome the fear of death. His passing in 1992 left a precious literary legacy, teaching us to know how to value cultural values and always maintain the dignity of an intellectual. Melvin Dixon reminds us that even if life is short, if we live deeply and kindly, our breath will still echo forever in the souls of those left behind. His life is a lesson about powerful stillness, teaching us to always look toward the light of truth and compassion. Keith Barrow. Keith Barrow was a brilliant soul and disco vocalist of the 70s, the son of the famous female minister and civil rights activist Willie Barrow. With a smooth falsetto voice and a captivating style, he was one of the rare artists who dared to bring the beauty of spiritual music into the vibrant world of disco. However, behind the glamour of colored lights and sparkling outfits was an internal battle between the religious faith of his family and his own true ego. Keith lived an ultimate tearing struggle to satisfy the expectations of a prestigious family, while his heart belonged to the LGBTQ+ community. Keith Barrow's tragedy is the tragedy of a child always yearning for parents' approval, but unable to live according to the mold they set. He spent his entire life singing about love, but it was a love full of sorrow and concealment. When the AIDS disease attacked his body in the early 80s, Keith had to face loneliness and the pain of being stigmatized right in the very places he once called home. His departure at the age of 29 was a huge shock, exposing the truth about religious and social barriers that suffocated the right to live true of Black artists. He died in the silence of prayers, unable to rescue the personal ego from strict dogmas. Through a contemplative lens, the story of Keith Barrow is a profound teaching about family love. He taught us that the most genuine tolerance is not forcing relatives to follow our will, but accepting them with all their inherent differences. His departure reminds us to build homes based on understanding instead of judgment. Keith Barrow has left forever, but his sweet singing voice will always remind us of a soul that once burned its brightest to seek a harmony between the sanctuary and real life. His life teaches us to lessen the chains of prejudice so that every child can confidently hold their head high and speak the truth of their heart without fear of being hurt or rejected. Closing the historical stories full of ups and downs, we hope the video has brought you empathetic perspectives on the courage to live true to one's ego and the silent sacrifices behind the halo. We respectfully wish you to always keep peace in your soul and have truly warm moments of rest overflowing with laughter beside your beloved family dinner table. If these reflections brought meaningful value, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell to continue accompanying our memory vault. Goodbye, and see you again.